Welcome everybody. My name is Jody Schneiderman, and I am the industry advisor at the Cawley Career Education Center for the Health Science and Tech students at Cawley, and I'm going to be your moderator today. Most of this event was organized by the student group Disruptive Tech. And if you don't know Disruptive Tech, they are an organization at Georgetown University. They were founded in 2019, and they're here to push various tech-related industries and if you could mute your, that would be great. Okay. Anyway, so sorry about that. This is a Disruptive Tech, great student group. So definitely get involved if you are interested in anything tech. It's a great student group. And so actually for the leaders of Disruptive Tech, if you could put your web link or how to get involved in the chat, that would be great. The format for today, we're going to have Stephanie Lio. She works at Microsoft, and she's going to give us about a 5 to 10 minute talk about just where you can find what kind of roles exist in tech and what that looks like. And then we're going to go through and hear about each panelist in terms of their own career journey and any advice that they can share and what their day-to-day looks like in their roles. So Stephanie, if you wouldn't mind getting us started and sharing more about non-engineering roles in the tech world, that would be great.
Sure. Hi, I am Stephanie, and I am a product marketing manager at Microsoft. So full disclosure that this is sort of my interpretation of how I see kind of the spectrum of tech roles, and a lot of this is going to be filtered through my lens as somebody who's on the product marketing side of it. So I think when we talk about being technical in the tech industry, a lot of times what we mean is how much kind of hands-on development or engineering experience or direct involvement the role is. So when I talk about non-technical or non-engineering roles, I'm really referring to a whole lot of roles that make the industry happen. So it's not just the people who are building the technology, it's also people who are figuring out how to market and position it. It's people who are making sure that the engineers are building the right things, putting together specs for what exactly the end product is going to look like. It's the people who are making sure that customers are buying it, sales and field activity, as well as people who are helping to make sure that once it's bought, it's being put to use in the correct way that's going to keep the customer re-upping their contracts for years to come, hopefully. And so I think, at least when I recall my time as a student at Georgetown, I think there's a real tendency to rush toward whatever kind of the big shiny object is in terms of campus recruiting. And so sometimes that means rushing headlong towards, the most intense part of whatever you're recruiting for. And so sometimes when I hear people say, I don't have an engineering background, but I'm going to try and, do a boot camp and become a developer, or, I, really want to go into product management. I think that it's great to evaluate your skills and just be really conscious about what do you like to do, where your strengths are, and making sure that that matches to the role that you want to be in. Because in truth, there's a lot of ways you can get involved in the tech industry, and it doesn't necessarily need to mean that you have to spend, your entire day coding. And it doesn't even necessarily need to mean that you have to work with people who like coding if it turns out that your temperament just doesn't work in that environment. So what I'm really excited about with this panel is we all come from kind of different backgrounds. We all represent and sit in different parts of a team. And I think you'll find that we all have very different perspectives on what our day-to-day look like, what our days to day kind of activities look like, and how you can be successful in each of them. And just adding one more spiel, I think it's really important that all of you, coming from a school like Georgetown, where we're really taught to be globally minded and to think about how different issues and complex systems work together, that is so vital, really, in the world of tech. issue and problem you can kind of see out there when it comes to people building products that aren't fitting the customer needs. When you think about, companies that are just running into all sorts of kind of gnarly ethical, political, policy questions, it really comes down to the fact that we need more people who are systems thinkers and are going to bring kind of that critical mindset to the industry. So bottom line is you have stuff to contribute, and it doesn't have to be in one specific role. So yeah, we're here to help, and we're here to shed some light on what that looks like.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. I think I read somewhere it was somewhere around 50 some, maybe even more percent of jobs in tech companies are non-engineering, non-tech roles. I don't know if you would agree with that, something around there.
I think it's going to depend a lot on the size of the company. Again, at Microsoft, we are so large, and a lot of what we do is really reliant on our sales force. So we put a lot of investment behind the way that we go to market and the way that we sell and the way that we support our customers. So I think that could be true.
That makes sense. Well, the good news is there's a lot of different roles out there, and thank you for sharing your thoughts on that. Okay, well, so let's start with each of the panelists. If you can share your career journey with us. How did you get to where you're at? And Haley, we'll start with you.
Awesome. Well, hello, everyone. My name is Haley Allen, and my pronouns are she, her. And I just have to say, it's so fun to see Stephanie. You'll hear about my career journey, but Stephanie and I both went to Georgetown, same with Ashley, but I also was, Stephanie was my buddy when I was at Deloitte. So it's really fun to see you again, Stephanie, on the panel. So a little bit about, I guess, first my role. I'm a high-touch customer success manager at Slack Technologies, which is a communication collaboration platform. And I'll talk about that a little bit more, but in terms of my career journey, I started when I was at Georgetown. It all really started after taking Brooks Holtom's organizational behavior class. I decided that I was really interested in humans and how they really bring their different strengths to work. And that sort of led me to explore the human capital elements of consulting. And so when I was looking at internships, I ended up interning at Deloitte in their human capital practice. Stephanie was my buddy at the time. I credit a lot of my learning to her. And then after graduation in 2014 from the college, where I was an English major and a business minor, I went to work full-time at Deloitte's federal practice as a human capital practitioner. And I learned so much at Deloitte. That's such a great place to really build business acumen. I decided I wanted to work in their commercial practice and moved to New York 2 years later. And I, did the 4 days a week travel consulting thing, and I learned so much. It was a fast-paced, fun, really exciting time in my life. And I kind of got to a point where I think I needed a change of pace after 2 years of, sometimes traveling between New York City and LA on a Monday and a Thursday. It was a lot. But I just have so many good things to say about Deloitte. Then I decided to kind of transition my skill sets I built at Deloitte to technology. And I was actually referred to Slack by a friend from Georgetown who worked there at the time and started in customer success. So I can speak to that later, but I will let Ashley share her career journey.
That's awesome. It's so cool that you had such a plan going into it. I think my journey was somewhat the opposite. I did not have a plan going in. I was a German and art history major at Georgetown, and when I graduated, I really wanted to go into the art world, and I kind of hit a wall. I started as a docent at a museum in DC and found a great mentor who helped me really think about whether art was what I wanted to do or if I really wanted to solve problems. So I started working at Zipcar in DC in their member services organization. And from there, I was able to build basic project management and business skills. So that helped me get a job at Uber. I transitioned there after about 1.5 years, and I've spent the last 7 years at Uber in a variety of functions. I started in operations in the local team, and then moved into a global role, moving from Boston, spent a few months in the Philippines, kind of building out our teams there. then moved to San Francisco and started working more closely with the technical side of Uber. It was there that I realized I wanted to move onto the tech side. And because I'd learned so much about the business, that was a lot easier. So even if you don't have a technical background, you can still get there a lot of times by learning about a business from the inside. So for the last year and a half, I've been a product manager. I focus on payments, and I'm now working out of Amsterdam. So quite a range of things. Yeah.
You're the Georgetown global dream, Ashley. um,
Fun.
so, yeah. So as Haley mentioned, I also started my career out of Georgetown at Deloitte. I pretty much dabbled in everything, I think, at Georgetown. I was a Chinese language and government major and a business minor. I was bound for law school, and then I took this one accounting class where the professor happened to say something about how thinking through the accounting problem set was really similar to like finding details in law. And it kind of started to get me thinking whether or not I really wanted to pursue that as a career. And somebody at the Career Center, actually, I don't remember whom it was, but she told me, if you can do anything else, consider doing that first before you put down the investment to go to law school. And at the same time, I think one of my business classes, I just found I was really drawn toward some of the projects where we were thinking about how to really sell things and position products. And I didn't know it then, but it was really kind of tapping into my love of marketing and my love of launching new ideas into the market. But I would agree. I think Deloitte was such a great training ground for me to build a professional skill set and to get to learn how to manage teams even before I was really a people manager. They just do such a good job of putting you in situations where you have to learn how to lead at every stage of the way. But I learned through that experience that I love the problem solving set. I did not love client service. And I think this is where thinking about the kind of role you want to go into is so important. I did try to see if I could apply to some customer success roles initially. Started to sense that that wasn't a great fit for, again, if you don't love client service, it may not be the way to go. And I ended up going to business school where I got my MBA and kind of used that as a way to pivot into first an internship doing business program management at Deloitte, and then coming back full time doing product marketing. So it was a multi-step journey as well. And I don't know that I had a clear plan either. I think it just kind of was a series of revelations and figuring out and learning on the job. So I completely agree with Ashley. You don't necessarily have to come in fully formed, but learning a business is a really great way to figure out what you like and don't like.
Perfect. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, Stephanie and Haley, you obviously both started at Deloitte, but otherwise you all have very different, career trajectories and in terms of the thought process to get there. So it's really fun to hear those differences. Haley, let's start with you again. What does your day-to-day look like in your work? And I know it's often different. So it's different. Every day is different for all of you, but what can you give us some examples or even like a project that you've worked on to help us get an idea of what that looks like?
Absolutely. Yeah. So in my role as a customer success manager, we have two different types of customer success teams at Slack. There's a scale team, which kind of supports our medium-sized customers, and the high touch team, which is what I'm on, and supporting some of our largest customers. I just have fewer of them in my, what we call book of business. And so customer success really as a whole is one of those roles in tech that is non-technical, but works with the tech teams to support our customers. So like Stephanie mentioned, I'm in a customer facing role. And on a daily basis, I'm really working with customers to make sure that they're getting the intended value of Slack from the tool. That's really the point of customer success, is to make sure that our customers are actually seeing business value out of the tool. You can buy a software, and if you don't actually use it in a way that drives business value, there's really no point in that investment. So that's really what my job is to manage the customer relationships, to work with executives at those customers to understand what are their business priorities and how is Slack going to help drive those. So on a daily basis, I generally kind of take time for myself in the morning, walk my dog, listen to my podcasts, and obviously in today's world, we're working virtually. So get online around 8:30. And from there, it looks like probably 4 to 5 customer meetings in the day. Those customer meetings can range from an executive business review where I'm meeting with, some of the folks in the C-suite that have made the decision to invest in Slack, where we're looking at how is their company using the tool, what is the value that they're getting, and defining the priorities for how we're going to partner together in the coming year. Sometimes I'll just have like bi-weekly meetings with customers, and that's more of the project team that's focused on either rolling out or deepening the ways that they're using Slack. And then I'll also have meetings internally, whether it's my team meeting, we're all individual contributors, but we have a customer success manager and we're on a team together. So those are always kind of fun. And then I work heavily cross-functionally with people on our product teams, our customer experience teams, really to advocate for the customer if they need something. So let's say a customer really wants this function or feature that's not available in the tool. That's where I really advocate for their need and go to the product teams and say, this is really the business value. Can we prioritize this in our roadmap? So lots of different things, and there's way more I could talk about, but I'll pass it over to Ashley.
Cool. My days are also fairly variable. It just depends kind of where I am in the product development cycle. So generally I start my days meeting with designers that I'm working with on a project, see kind of what they've been working on, give them feedback, kind of talk through what I'm thinking. Then I'll go through project meetings. So generally I'll have a bunch of different projects that are at different stages going on at once. Some of them are in the discovery phase where I'm trying to figure out what problem we're trying to solve, what data we have to support what the solution should look like, or it'll be in the design or build phase where I'm working with designers or engineers to make that come to life, or I'll be working with data to test it and launch it into customers. So I have a bunch of meetings throughout the day, kind of making sure projects go through that cycle, which is pretty fun. I find it to be a fairly creative role. And then also like fairly administrative tasks, like making sure that staffing is in line, figuring out project sequencing, meeting with a bunch of stakeholders to get their feedback on my projects or to help them use my products. So yeah, it varies quite a lot. Generally a lot of times in meetings, lots of time on Slack, but pretty interesting. Stephanie?
Yeah, the meetings are so real. And I think because I find that definitely like the product managers that I work with and the product marketing team that kind of is matrixed in with our product teams, because we're so interdependent, we end up having like multiples of meetings because you're trying to get so many different points of view, and the hunt for data is so real. I would say that really defines kind of each day. You're trying to find some kind of data to solve some kind of different problem. And that's kind of where the variability comes from. So if I'm focusing on kind of the more the product end of my responsibilities, it might be supporting my PMs to make sure that, hey, we're building the right thing. So it might be like working with my research team to get customer research, market research, to kind of test what sort of value propositions are really resonating with potential customers. So I might be gathering data in that sense, but it could also be from, a field-facing perspective. I might be going to folks who represent sales or folks who represent like licensing and saying, what are you hearing from customers, or what kind of complaints are you getting about the way licensing and pricing works, and how can we fix it? And so a lot of meetings kind of revolve around different parts of that process, but they're really all about people just trying to get the right data to make decisions. I work specifically on the identity product within Microsoft. So we are responsible for a lot of different teams' products as well. So if you think about it, identity or the ability to sign in and sign up for services is built into almost every single product that we make at Microsoft. And or even, payments, I'm sure it's very similar. It's like built and embedded into so many other things that people are building. So when you are a product and you're a dependency for other people's builds, you end up having to kind of juggle a lot of different responsibilities to make sure that you're delivering both what you said you were going to do and also make sure that you're not blocking somebody else's progress. So I would say I spent a lot of time also prioritizing of all the things that I can get done this week, what is absolutely critical to make sure that I'm on task and I'm also not getting in somebody else's way. When I first started my role, the product managers I worked with a lot would talk a lot about blockers and just making sure that they were unblocking other people at all times. And I thought that was so funny because it wasn't something I had really heard about in my previous go-to-market role. And now I understand. Like I spend probably 30% of my time just making sure that I'm not holding up somebody else from getting what they need to do. I think on my best days, it's the day that we launch. That's the most fun part is when you hit go. And for marketing, a lot of times it's a big event or a press moment, and we get to see the press coverage rolling in. We get to see social media light up. We see an analyst report come back that puts us at the top of the quadrant, and that's really, when we get a little moment to celebrate. But there is a lot that goes into each launch that sometimes can be unglamorous. It can look like 8 straight hours of meetings, but it's all really fun when you get to light it up and people are starting to use the product.
Perfect. Thank you, Stephanie. Okay, well, if each of you could answer, and we'll start again with Haley, what would you have done differently while at Georgetown, knowing what you now know?
This is an interesting one. I'd say the first is just probably be easier on myself, that I'm not going to figure out, they tell you that no one stays in the same role for the rest of their lives. And I think all three of us are examples of, at least at this point, that used to sort of be the model that people followed. And so I was like, I am going to be so passionate about human capital consulting. This really vibes with what my values are and what I think my strengths are. And that was certainly true at the time, but, just less, I think focusing, this is what my dad always told me, that focusing on building skill sets is really what's going to take you far. So, at Deloitte, there were projects that I was on that it wasn't my passion. I was doing some of the grunt work as an analyst, but I think maintaining Georgetown's value of staying curious and working really hard and just focusing on building skill sets in everything you do, that's what's really going to set you up for success in any of these roles that we're talking about. The other thing is that you come out of Georgetown not only with a ton of friends, but a network that you can tap into in the future. And that's super powerful. There's so many fascinating peers that I have from Georgetown that are doing cool things all over the world. And it's a really great way for me to stay connected with them. So just remember that stay connected with the people you graduate with, because you never know what doors might open to you from those connections. Those are sort of some of the learnings. Ashley?
Yeah, on my side, when I think back, I also worked super, super hard when I was at Georgetown, which I'm glad I did. I loved learning. I was like super, super curious all the time. But I felt really pressured to have like the right majors. Like I ended up with, I think, 2 minors and a major, or 2 majors and a minor in German, art history, and history. And to be honest, it didn't really matter if one of them was a major or one of them was a minor. What really mattered is what I knew how to do, or how I taught myself how to learn. If I had gone back, and what I would have done differently is I would have taken those classes that I was super interested in but didn't think fit. So I would have taken more art classes. I would have taken statistics, which would have been super helpful in my job now, as I'm trying to learn the basics of data science. I would have gone into those classes that I found super interesting. Like I took an ethics class that was largely focused on logic. I loved learning about logic. I would have gone and take a second class in that rather than taking like, I don't know, extra courses in my major. Yeah, I think really following your interests and letting that guide you towards a career would have been the main change that I would have made.
I resonate with that so much. Just like no one cares if you have a minor in something. Like if you are interested in a subject, but you don't think you're going to do particularly well in it, you should just take it and audit it or take it pass fail. Because I think for me, yeah, I relate so much to that. Like I was very focused on what's like the minimum number of classes I could take in a particular subject to hit minor so it would look official on my transcript, and in reality like no employer cares about what you minored in. And you know, if you have a double major, that's great, but it's more important that you have interesting stories to tell and that you have a narrative about why you pursued those things. And just showing intentionality, I think, in how you learn is so much more valuable than actually coming away with a piece of paper that says you did. Because I think one thing I wish I knew is there are some career paths that are very marked out for you in terms of what success looks like after 4 or 6 years. In consulting, for example, I don't know, Haley, if this resonates, but like, you know, that you should be promoted by year 2 and 4, and that after 10 years, you know, you're going to hopefully hit partner or you're going to be on partner track. Banking and law, and there's a lot of tracks where I think the path is a little bit more formulaic. If you're pursuing tech or a whole host of other industries, it's going to be very vague, and so you're really going to have to establish for yourself in school a definition of success that is intrinsic and not determinate by, you know, whether you have a fancy piece of paper that says you did it. You know, there's so many people that I work with who come from very different educational backgrounds, that come from non-traditional backgrounds. And we don't care. It really just matters what they bring to the table and how eager they are to learn. And so I didn't learn this until business school, but it was so freeing for me to take classes that I knew I wanted to get better at, but I knew it wasn't going to be good for my GPA. And so, yeah, I would have done more of that. And I would have taken statistics as well, because it turns out that we're using a lot of it incorrectly on an everyday basis. And it's super helpful to have a good nose for how to read data.
So aside from taking statistics, what advice would you give students that are trying to secure a job or an internship in the tech industry? Haley, we'll start with you.
Yeah, so just from my particular, I wouldn't say this is universal, but what worked for me was actually not focusing on getting into tech right out of school. I'd say, and this mainly applied to Slack, but historically there weren't a lot of jobs right out of school in the tech space. I'd say we kind of more often than not, and again, like Stephanie said earlier, it's going to vary across like sizes of tech companies. You might be able to get a job in a startup or at a smaller company in their customer success space, but getting experience and growing your skill sets that will later apply to roles that you might want to do in technology. So something like consulting, in my experience, I think that the skills that lend themselves to customer success were honed and developed in a place that had so much resources, and I could meet with so many different people that had just like wealth of information and knowledge to pass on to me. That was really invaluable in coming to my role now and being able to like learn this new SaaS world, but really apply the skills that I learned in consulting. So that's just one route I would say, is think about the skill sets in the jobs in tech that you are interested in, and don't feel like you need to start in technology. You can start in other industries, but really think about the skill sets that you're hoping to build if you are interested in customer success or product management, that sort of thing.
Yeah, that definitely resonates. I didn't go directly into tech, and it took me quite a while to actually move into a more technical role. at Uber. But what I think was really helpful for me was doing research and understanding when I did find a company that I really wanted to work for. And I interviewed at Uber right out of school, and I did not have the skills that were required. So then I went back and really thought about, okay, I want to work there eventually. How can I get there? And one thing that really helps me internally at my job now, but also when I was applying, is figuring out what types of problems the company is trying to solve. Because ultimately, no matter what role you're in, you're going to be helping that company solve those problems. So when I joined Uber, that was like, how do we get people from A to B? How do we get uh, rides for drivers? How do we match everyone in this marketplace? So really thinking about how I would solve that problem and how I could contribute to solving that problem, I think was helpful. Just getting me prepared into the mindset of being at a tech company before I was even interviewing. Yeah, I think figuring out what problems you want to solve also really matters, because even if you love your job, there are going to be hard days. So figure out what problems you want to focus on, even when it's hard.
Yeah, and I would say just remembering that there are tech roles in every industry now. You don't have to necessarily be in a high tech industry company to have a job that's going to give you the kind of skills that will let you work on these kind of problems. I had read that I believe GM now employs more engineers than any Fangam company at this stage, and you can see this across consumer electronics. You can see this in the publishing world. You know, every industry to some extent is a tech industry in that they have to adapt to the world that technology is created. So if you're, I think I said this in the beginning, but really think hard about where everyone is running to and whether you want to run there too before you jump into that competitive mess. I used to hate the conference room networking sessions. No offense to anyone who's had to organize one, but used to give me so much anxiety because um, I just don't enjoy connecting in that kind of rushed environment. I didn't love having to like figure out how to cut into a circle and like wave my resume in front of somebody. And part of the problem was, I think at least early in my time at Georgetown, I was going for the same jobs and the same career fairs as everyone else on campus. And so, if you just think about statistics again, if everybody is going after the same roles at the same companies, unless you are really passionate and you have a plan for pursuing that, sometimes there may be other doors open that no one else is noticing that may be easier to get to. So if you're really eager to get into tech right out of school, I would look for those doors. I would look to get a foot in the door, and just to remember that there's so much mobility after you're in. My first role at Microsoft was not in product marketing. It was not kind of a more technical marketing role. It was much more focused on go-to-market, competitive intelligence, understanding how to kind of take our products and package them for the financial services industry. And over time, I managed to navigate into a more technical product marketing role. So even once you're in the industry, there's going to be so many steps along the way to explore. And I'm sure it's not going to be over for any of us either. I'm sure we'll have many more pivots to come.
Great. Well, thank you, everybody. Okay, so we are going to open this up now to the Q&A portion. So actually, what I'm going to have you do, I've prompted you a little bit in the chat here to be thinking of some questions. It looks like Ryan has a great question. So Ryan, if you wouldn't mind speaking up and just sharing your question for, it looks like mostly Stephanie and Ashley.
Yeah, sure. Thanks. Hi, Stephanie. Hi, Haley and Ashley and everyone else. I am a junior in the MSB, and I'm double majoring in marketing and management. And this upcoming summer, I'm interning at Google in their associate product marketing management division. It's a mouthful, but as an APMM intern. And I was wondering from Stephanie and maybe Ashley or Haley, if you guys have experience as well, what sort of career trajectories do product marketing managers typically follow after a few years in product marketing and tech.
Yeah, well, congratulations. I think with a big company, one thing you'll see is that a spectrum of people who come into product marketing. You have folks who are still kind of figuring out whether they want to be product marketers or product managers. I do think that there is a lot of overlap between the skill sets that you share. You know, to some extent, we're both really invested in creating a great product that customers will love. However, the accountabilities are different in my mind. And so I think for you this summer, just spending some time thinking about whether you want to spend more time on the marketing side of it or on the product development and management side of it is going to be a really good use of your summer. At least in my opinion, I think I love to influence product features and product roadmap, but at the end of the day, I'm accountable for how we're positioned in market, for how we're messaging. So essentially, when customers think about the product, what is that tagline that they're coming away with, and how are influencers in the industry, how are analysts in the industry responding to it, and how are we reacting to our competitors? And the PMs that I work with are super interested in that as well. But at the end of the day, they're responsible for leading engineering to make the product technically the best it can be. And so I think we both work really closely together, but I've always been more of a storyteller. I've always been more interested in kind of crafting that part of the story, of the product story, and less interested in sitting down with engineers and kind of figuring out the specs. So it just kind of depends on what you like more. And I think in terms of trajectory, yeah, you'll see PMs and PMMs switch places. You'll see people come and go. If you stay in product marketing, you can, you know, a lot of our CMOs and VPs of product come from that kind of discipline as well. So it really varies. But I would definitely encourage you to spend your summer kind of thinking about, hey, is this interesting to me, or would I rather be on the other side of the table?
Thank you. Thank you.
I've seen product marketing managers really grow their scope a lot as well. So if you start with like a smaller program that you're marketing, maybe working on launches, you can then grow into influencing how something is branded before it's even built. And then, yeah, really get involved in the development process. But yeah, product marketing is such a big world. There's tons of room for growth within that vertical, even if you stay in that same space.
Well, thank you both. I appreciate it.
Thanks for the question, Ryan, and congratulations. William, we will move on to you and your question.
This is probably not going to be a super structured question because it's going to hit a lot of points and I'm just really in my head about all of this. But so like I have like two or like three technical co-founders right now, right? And thus far I've kind of been like an operations business element and that storytelling element. I've always enjoyed writing. I've always done like MUN, youth and government. I came to Georgetown for those like finance, business maybe, but politics too, that kind of stuff. And what I've realized though is that I just like, yeah, have this insecurity about the technical ability. And I know, and I've been, you know, I've jumped into CS this semester and I've been like trying to self-study more, but in my head, I'm like, am I wasting my time doing that? Because I know I have technical co-founders and I know that they're telling me like, hey, keep doing what has always made you valuable. But I'm like trying to think long-term and be like, okay, I understand that these things have made me valuable, but am I going to box hole myself if I don't, you know, tread out and like, you know, do a flip and start learning technical skills? Pretty much. I'm kind of asking the same question, but like, yeah.
I can go first. I never think it's a waste to learn something. First, yes, you want to lean into your strengths, but also, particularly if you want to do more PM work in the future, you also don't want to let your devs take advantage of you and tell you something is going to take 8 weeks when it should take 2 if they're competent. So I don't think it's ever a waste of time. Like I don't code other than, you know, learning some front end when I was younger, but I've picked up enough from working really closely with PMs to know how long things should take. And it is so invaluable
I never thought of that. You just
Yeah.
made me light bulb.
Like you can't lead effectively and you can't project manage effectively unless you kind of know how long it should take. And you want to trust your co-founders, but it's good. There's nothing like having firsthand knowledge and empathy for how hard it is sometimes to build stuff. But I think Ashley would be really great to weigh in here as a product manager.
Yeah, I would say you don't have to be able to do everything perfectly, but having a baseline understanding of how someone else's job works really makes you good at collaborating with them. Like, yeah, as Stephanie said, like having empathy for what their job is like and what the difficulties could be, also helping unblock them when you know that they're going to get stuck can be really helpful. So yeah, I would say imposter syndrome is really real in tech. So I would say be kind to yourselves. It's really hard to go up against people who are stronger in a certain area. Like I don't have coding skills really. I've done like very basic copy paste coding, and all of my engineers are amazingly talented. So if you're interested in that, go for it. If you hate it, you don't have to do it. You can still be successful in tech without those skills. So yeah, see what works for you.
Yeah, and I would just add one last thing around translation is important as the functional counterpart to a technical resource. You want to be able to explain things to people who aren't technical and to people who are. And I think in product management, marketing, and customer success, it's really being able to talk the talk without really knowing all of the detail. So if you know it that much, like they said, you'll be just fine.
Okay, thank you. Everything you guys just said validated how I've been thinking about it. So thank you a lot. That was great.
Awesome.
Great. We have a question from Rachel. She says, it's been such a pleasure listening to you all, and I'm super proud to see how well-rounded and intelligent each panel member is. I have a question regarding the emotional intelligence needed to create fluent communication between tech and non-tech employees. How do you create inclusive environment? How do you create an inclusive environment? So communications between the tech and non-tech, and then creating an inclusive environment.
I think we're still trying to figure this out across a lot of the tech industry, despite, I think, having been ahead in a lot of ways on creating inclusive environments where people can be their authentic selves. I think obviously like every company, every industry.
How are you?
To go.
Good. I'm like rushing between calls.
We're stuck in a meeting.
No worries. I know the feeling. Okay. Perfect.
Yeah. Got a mute issue, but I think you need a lot of emotional intelligence to manage a lot of different kinds of stakeholders and just to work with a lot of different people. For me, I think it comes from just having a respect for what every role does and knowing that, hey, there are some kinds of work that I am not gifted at or would not like to spend my days doing, but I am so thankful that there are people who are brilliant at it, that I can rely on them. And whenever there's been instances where I feel like my role is not necessarily, or my accountabilities aren't being quite respected in a certain way, you also have to be able to stand up for yourself and be able to say, again, going back to William's question, like, just because I don't know what that acronym is, or just because I don't know this new language that you're coding in, it doesn't mean I don't logically understand how this product is supposed to come together and I know something is wrong. And so I think you also have to have emotional intelligence for yourself to know that not knowing an acronym or not knowing what a specific thing is in that moment doesn't mean you're not intelligent. It doesn't mean that you don't have an opinion that's important. I've been in plenty of meetings where I think very conceptually about the product sometimes, and I like to kind of draw it out for myself. And there are times where it may not, I have to show that picture to my PM and be like, is this how you're thinking about the architecture? And then, you know, when they are able to kind of see that and translate it to their spec sheet and say, yeah, that's basically what we're trying to build, we together are able to have so much more respect for the process. Whereas if, my PM were to say, oh, that doesn't make sense, just read my spec sheet and you should get it. Or if I were to say, oh, you don't understand our market, and so I'm going to ignore you. Like, that's kind of where the process starts to break down. So it becomes a less pleasant work environment, as well as a not great working relationship between the team. I think inclusivity has to come from a respect, and also just knowing that people don't always work the same way as you do, and that's okay, and that people come from very different walks of life and have different frames of references. In marketing, I spend a lot of time naming things and playing with words, and it is sometimes really humbling to see that a phrase that is very intuitive to me doesn't resonate the same with somebody who comes from a different background, who maybe be from a different culture, and just having, I think, the grace to learn and to grow when things aren't right.
I love that, Stephanie. I would add to that, I love like the grace to grow. The ability to ask uncomfortable questions is also important. If you're working with a technical role, or really anyone, this is in consulting or tech, the ability to ask them how they prefer to communicate and collaborate, and also to be confident enough and in a graceful way, ask for what you need I'm like such an over communicator. I love lists, and I know that's not how everyone operates. So having that dance back and forth to clarify what each of us needs has been important in the past.
Yeah, on my side, I would say I don't like to divide people into or assume what someone's personality will be like based on whether they're in a technical role or not. Generally, when I meet a new team member, I'll ask them like if they have any specific needs for how they want to communicate or what their working style is like. That really helps me kind of like level set. A lot of people don't have like a set opinion on this, or they'll say like, oh, I've never been asked that question before. Let me come back to you. And they'll say, oh, actually, I really don't like making decisions quickly. Can you send me an email, or can you send me a Slack message? Like I usually just kind of give them the opportunity to give me feedback on how we want to work together. And that generally creates a pretty like open and inclusive space, I think.
Thank you. Sorry, my apologies. I'm actually driving and on a call, and I'm parked on the side now. So my apologies coming in and out. I honestly just want to tell you guys, I've been in the working world for 25 years, and we're trying to the whole tech component. You're so spot on, because a lot of companies are going into this world. For a lot of professionals that are in this environment, there's this transition of younger, really tech savvy, and just you guys kind of embody all of that. So my concern was from that, in terms of this language barrier between people that are coming in and really understanding this whole tech component, and for people that are in marketing and sales and development and all the other components. And you guys answered it spot on. So thank you. I'll go on mute, and I'll just want to say, and one other piece regarding the the emotional intelligence, I think you guys all embody that. And then inclusivity, again, same thing, like for historical companies really haven't even figured it out, regardless of tech or not. So it looks like tech creates this opportunity to create a more inclusive environment where all opinions and all backgrounds are welcome. So I just wanted to highlight that, as a probably twice your age woman listening to you guys, I'm very proud of the way you guys answered each of the questions.
I think just to also acknowledge something for the students that are kind of navigating their first internships or jobs, like I think it's also important to recognize that this is something that we aspire to. We aspire to an inclusive and welcoming environment. I think you will find that, as in all workplaces, there are pockets that may not live up to that expectation. And so it's important to definitely find mentors and find allies and find ways to advocate for yourself within it. Just because, tech is this purported kind of utopia of bring your own self. Like I think it's been very clear that it's not always like that. So I don't say that to scare folks, but just to kind of bring some realism that the same rules apply. Like, document when things don't feel right. Put things on email. I know we love our Slack, we love Zoom, but when you need things in writing, like, get it in writing, and find people up the chain who are going to fight for you. So yeah, I appreciate that so much, but I always want to kind of let folks know it's not like that everywhere.
Yeah, definitely agree. Also, like, being that ally for someone else whenever you see something happening is super important. Like, you have the option to say something at all times, and I would always take that option and really support everyone around you.
Great. We have 3 more questions. So we'll see if we can get to all 3. We definitely want to start with somebody who's new. Alero, I don't know if I'm saying your name right. Please speak up and correct me if I'm wrong.
Hi, yeah, you're correct. My name's Alero, and this summer I'm interning at Facebook. So I have been thinking a lot of like consulting versus tech, and especially like where to start. Since I've had this, like, I also interned at Facebook last summer, so I've kind of had this experience and like I really loved it, but I'm wondering whether that's like a great starting platform or like you feel like you gather more skills from consulting, and I was wondering if you could speak to that.
Well, Alero, first of all, congratulations. That's awesome. What was your role at Facebook?
Last summer I was a product specialist, and this summer I'm still deciding where I'm going to be.
Got it. You know, there is no right path. And so I think that is awesome. Listen to what speaks to you. If this is really exciting for you, you're going to be able to grow those skills a company like Facebook is amazing. And really just thinking like, what are the skills you want to grow, and focusing on getting mentors that can help you grow those skills at Facebook or in consulting, and taking advantage of the resources. The one thing I would say kind of between consulting and tech that I have found I have enjoyed tech a little bit more, is that Stephanie spoke to this a little bit, like customer oriented roles where you are working on an SOW, meaning that you're actually kind of contractually obligated to complete a certain task or project, as in most consulting groups. That's often not the case. So while it's so fun to work with customers, at Slack, I'm not actually, working under an SOW. So there's sort of a difference between just kind of the cadence and the style of working with customers. In tech, it's a little different. And so it sounds like your roles aren't necessarily customer facing at Facebook, but something to think about if you're thinking about a customer facing role in tech versus consulting. Those 2 roles even look significantly different between consulting and tech. But again, both places are good places to start.
And hopefully they're all much more flexible about location, but would definitely weigh in, where do you want to end up after graduation? If it's a good time to ask Facebook if that's when you're interested in, like, how committed they are to staying flexible with remote work or with bases outside of Menlo Park. Not everybody wants to move to California. So, I hopefully now things are more open than ever, but I think geography is something I hear a lot of my friends talk about post-graduation being a little more important than we considered when we were in school. Hence, there's a big migration, usually 1 to 2 years after school, where everyone's kind of shuffling and trying to get back home or trying to move to a different city. So just another good one to keep in mind.
Yeah. From my side, I never was in consulting, but you can develop a lot of those a lot of the same skills in a program management type role. So if you're interested in kind of doing both, you could look for a program management role at Facebook potentially.
Thank you.
So I have a question from William. I'll just ask it to be quick here. He's just wondering, like, it's a great question, in terms of networking and protocols, conduct, what do you recommend in terms of reaching out to people, and any platforms that you recommend, and any particular, conduct, so to speak, in doing so? Reaching out to alums is most of it, I think.
I can just I think just being really graceful and offering a lot of gratitude for their time. And hopefully people know that, we were all helped by people that we knew. And so extending that grace and time to connect with our network is important. So just recognizing that people are taking time out of their day. I'd say clarity and communication and being very clear about options for times, make it as easy as possible for them, send the calendar invite, follow up with a thank you. Those are all things that are just like super small, but really appreciated, and being flexible. And obviously LinkedIn is a good place to start, but also having people that who have friends or peers that work in industries to introduce you is another way to perhaps get a little bit more return on your outreach, because people feel like a connection to the people that they know. Those are some tips. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I think I appreciate when folks are specific. Like, what exactly are you looking for? Because that can usually help me screen, like if I'm really the person to help, or if you really need to be talking to somebody else. If it's a very general question, look for things that folks have already done to try to answer it. I would say unlike, well, at least in my experience, unlike other industries where I've interviewed, a lot of us don't have a whole lot of insight into how campus recruiting works, or how the bigger the company, the harder it is actually. If you're at a startup, I'm sure that person you're reaching out to may know the hiring manager, but it's very rare at a large company or even a large startup that probably Ashley or Haley or I have any ability to get you a job directly. So I think just being thoughtful about your question, and just acknowledge that we may not be able to help, but that doesn't mean we don't wish you the best. And if I send you a blog or something that I've already created, it's not because I'm trying to blow you off, but I'm trying to scale my time and make sure that we help as many people kind of get the information as possible. Part of what I'm really passionate about too is just the democratization of information. So if I feel like sometimes answering a specific question might be somewhat unfair in terms of, like, if you're asking for interview questions, or I need a mock interview for this or that, like that may not be something we can help with, but we'll try to point you toward other resources that everyone else can also take advantage of.
Yeah, I think I totally agree. I would also say the point on specificity and like doing your research is really good. Like if you come and ask someone, tell me about everything about your company, like it's not really going to help you. So I would try and figure out what you're most interested in and what you're trying to learn from them, is really helpful, so that they can get you the information you need faster and to kind of help you more in a more impactful way.
Well, thank you, everybody. We had another great question. I really liked it, but we are out of time, and I want to respect everybody's time. And I know many of the students, are going to need to get off to class or another meeting, and you all probably have meetings given all the meetings that you have. So just want to give a virtual thank you to you all.